Democrats and Republicans can't agree on much, there seems to be an overwhelming consensus that America must lead the AI race. This requires investing in and supporting research and innovation here at home while promoting the spread of American AI technologies globally. It also requires ensuring that we are not contributing to the military and frontier AI capabilities of our chief competitor, the People's Republic of China. It would be an understatement to say that I'm concerned about the Trump administration's export control policy. I'm not simply concerned, I am alarmed, because this administration is ceding our advantages in the AI race and actively undermining our national security. The administration has used our export controls not as a vital national security tool, but as a bargaining chip in tariff negotiations with China. Desperate to resolve the trade war he started, Donald Trump has made multiple concessions to China to secure a trade deal. Trump rolled back his own export controls, first on selling the H-20 chip to China, then on the 50% affiliates rule, and now he's dead set on rolling back restrictions that the Biden administration put in place to ensure that our most advanced chips aren't sold to China. Last month, the president announced that he would greenlight the sale of NVIDIA's H200 chips to China, which the administration just formalized yesterday. This is a strategic mistake that will harm our advantage in the AI race and do grave damage to our national security. Just last month, when the Trump Justice Department charged two PRC individuals for smuggling H200s, it stated, "These chips are the building blocks of AI superiority and are integral to modern military applications," and I unquote. Additionally, the administration's proposal to seize 25% of the profits of H200 sales to China raises all kinds of legal, ethical, and policy questions. The Export Control Reform Act of 2018 is clear. No fees may be charged in connection with the consideration of any application for a license approval. Our national security should not be negotiable, and it should not be for sale. And that's why last month I introduced the Restrict Act to ban the sale of H200s to China and to codify the Biden administration's restrictions on the most advanced U.S. chips sales to China. Also last month, I sent a letter to the Department of Commerce requesting license information on advanced chip sales to China, as well as copies of any government-to-government agreements related to advanced chips exports. Despite my January 12th deadline, the Commerce Department has yet to provide the information I requested. Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask for unanimous consent to submit that letter into the record. So ordered. Again, I want to thank this panel of witnesses for appearing here today, but comprehensive oversight means we must also have administration officials testify publicly on this topic so that our members at this committee can conduct proper oversight. The stakes of the AI race and for our national security are too consequential. Mr. The President has said that he will not approve H200 licenses for bad actors in China. While this does not ally concerns about smuggling and diversions, I'm also skeptical that the administration will pick the right customers from the start. So, Mr. Pottinger, which foreign company is our biggest competition when it comes to developing the most advanced AI models?
The main Chinese companies, there's several of them. It includes DeepSeek, it includes Zhipu AI, Alibaba, ByteDance, which of course runs the TikTok algorithms that have distorted public discourse in this country, and there are many others, sir.
Yes, and DeepSeek is really one of the big ones. And would you agree that DeepSeek, for example, thus far has been constrained by our chip export controls?
The companies, from what I'm reading, that these Chinese companies have already ordered up something like 2 million of these chips since the decision was made to start
But my question was, do you agree that until it was found out that they were constrained beforehand?
Absolutely. And they fear that the gap would continue growing, but for the H200s.
And Mr. Feiner, could DeepSeek's open source models have been even more advanced if it had access to our more advanced chips?
Thank you, Ranking Member Meeks. I think the answer to that is undeniably yes. DeepSeek's model was built essentially on U.S. chips it acquired before export controls went into place, probably some chips that were smuggled subsequent to export controls going into place, and giving them access to more advanced chips will only allow them to build a better model. And by the way, you don't have to take my word for it. The DeepSeek CEO himself was recently quoted as saying, "Our problem has never been funding, it's the embargo on high-end chips."
And so you also think selling H200s to DeepSeek could hurt our lead in the AI race?
Yes.
I agree. It appears the administration does not, though. In fact, when a member of this committee asked the BIS Undersecretary to commit to denying H200 licenses for DeepSeek, he refused. So if this administration can't promise that they won't sell H200s to DeepSeek, how can we have any faith that it will make sound judgments about which end users in China should be approved for H200s? Let me go to something else that I'm deeply concerned about, and that's the idea that export controls could be used as a chip in trade deals. I'm interested if any of our witnesses can see a scenario where we should use export controls, which is at its core a national security function, as a bargaining chip on trade deals, as the administration has admitted it is doing. Let me start, I guess, with you, Mr. Feiner. What's your view on whether we should bargain away export controls for trade deals, and what does it mean for our credibility with allies and partners, and how it could impact our broader export controls framework?
I believe a good principle, a ranking member, is not to barter, exchange, or negotiate issues of national security in the context of trade negotiations or other economic challenges, whether that's national security-related export controls or doctrinal policy toward Taiwan or any number of other national security issues we have with the PRC.
Mr. Pottinger?
I second that.
Mr. Cass?
Certainly in the context of the negotiations they've been holding, there's nothing to negotiate. China's not able to offer anything of value because it's not interested in actually having a constructive relationship with the United States.
So let me ask this, will be my last question. By rolling back our controls against China, has the administration created incentives for our partners to do the same thing? And what impact do you think it has on working with allies and partners on export controls against China in the future? Mr. Feiner?
So I mentioned in my opening statement, as did some of the others, we haven't focused on it as much in the questions, but the other key control that is placed on technology going to China is semiconductor manufacturing equipment. And there is almost an explicit, certainly an implicit understanding among the United States and then the other countries that make this SME that if we are going to ask of them not to give their companies access to the Chinese market to sell SME, we should be asking the same thing of our chip makers, not to have access to the Chinese market for the most advanced semiconductors. If we roll back or erode the restrictions on our own companies, certainly the incentive is there for them to roll back or erode the restrictions they're placing on their own companies, and that's one of the big concerns I have about the recent announcement related to the H200.
Thank you.
That the whole story be told here, and that recent reporting says that Chinese customs authorities have blocked all H200s from actually getting through customs in China, and that's another indicator that they're really not interested in a substandard chip, and there's a lot of politics involved in this. But look, we're all, I think, interested in safeguarding America. Mr. Cass, U.S. controls don't preclude equipment going to China, but they just preclude American equipment going to China. Some of the advanced test equipment. For that, there are only two suppliers, right? One is an American company that is not allowed to supply Huawei. Another is a Japanese company that does. And this test equipment is essential to improving the design and efficiency. Shouldn't we, or should we focus on what we can do to stop the single foreign company from undermining our controls and helping Huawei develop these advanced chips?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it raises a very important point, and one that Mr. Feiner was just speaking to as well, which is that for this policy to be effective toward China, there are alliances that need to be maintained, and we do need to hold hands with our partners in standing against China. This sort of situation where the U.S. imposes an export control, but an ally doesn't, harms our own company without doing much to accomplish what we want in China. So I think we need to further strengthen the terms on which we really insist that our allies work with us on this. We do have laws in this country that allow us to further that, and we should use them. The problem, as Mr. Feiner just said, is it is awfully hard to do that if we are at the same time opening up China for our own companies. And so we should absolutely focus on those sorts of issues you've raised, but we are not going to be able to do that unless we get these fundamental export controls with respect to our own producers right.
Certainly I understand that, and I'm sure that Japan understands it's a big world with a lot of different moving parts, and we're talking about one company. And I'm sure there's a way to bridge that gap and maintain the alliance while hemming China in. Mr. Pottinger brings me to a critical vulnerability, which is dual-use companies on DoD's 1260H list of the Chinese military companies still able to access U.S. capital markets today, even as of the June 30th, 2026 procurement ban as that looms. This afternoon, I will be introducing the Divesting from Communist China's Military Act, which would mandate automatic Treasury inclusion of any newly added 1260H entities onto the NSC-MIC list within 90 days. This would restrict U.S. persons from purchasing their securities, harmonizing regimes, and cutting off capital that funds dual-use AI breakthroughs like reasoning models for autonomous swarms or generative tools for intelligence analysis. Technically speaking, many 1260H firms contribute to the PLA's military-civil fusion pipelines that accelerate adoption of civilian LLMs into the defense system. Does closing the investment loophole strengthen our position and send a very strong signal?
Thanks so much, Congressman. I look forward to learning more about your bill. You know, during the first Trump administration, President Trump did move forward on a limited list of Chinese companies to try to prohibit Americans from investing in them, and even to force divestiture over a period of a year. I believe that this is a wise policy, and it sounds like it's very much in tune with what you're advancing. We have the deepest, largest, and most liquid pools of capital in the world available on our markets here. And Beijing has used that to their advantage. And
we've allowed them to do it regardless of administration and politics. We've allowed them to do it at our own peril and actually given them special treatment vis-a-vis our own American investors.
That's right. There was, fortunately, the Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act that was passed a few years ago that was designed to close at least one of those loopholes, and I'm not even sure that has been closed yet. So thanks for your leadership on that.
Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. I yield the balance.
Representative Liu is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Mass. Before I talk
I appreciate this rule and the step towards that, but we all know, one, the devil's in the details, and two, rules and regulations are only as good as your willingness to enforce them. And that is what we're going to be watching for on this. So I'm going to start. Obviously, we've got some crown jewels here in artificial intelligence with Colossus 1 and 2 data centers, thanks to Elon Musk, which together host more than 1 million H100 equivalent AI chips. Data centers like this underpin, I believe, America's advantage in AI versus the Chinese Communist Party and their capabilities. So, Mr. Cass, let's say China had its own equivalent Colossus 1 and 2. What kind of military intelligence and economic capabilities could that unlock?
I think it's important to distinguish between two steps. There's both a question of to what extent can they train better and more powerful models, and then what capacity do they have to actually be running the models. And so certainly to the extent that they have more of the most advanced chips, can build a cluster more like Colossus, they're in a better position to train a more powerful model. The second problem...
the 2 million number was thrown out by Mr. Pottinger earlier, and whether that's actually 100% accurate or not, we know that any significant number of those types of chips could bring this type of capability, correct, and basically create the ecosystem.
That would be a step change for China to have access to that many advanced chips.
Yes, and just to then emphasize one additional point, and this goes to the Congressman's question about how far behind China is. At the end of the day, the rate that you can deploy AI, whether for defense or in your economy, comes down to the total amount of computational power that you have. And so I think a best way to think about whether we are ahead or not is what share of that most advanced computational power do we have. We were roughly at parity with China before we imposed all these export controls. We now have a 5x advantage. To Mr. Pottinger's point, we should be trying to drive that higher, not saying it's okay for it to come down.
I mean, not everybody agrees, right? I mean, there are some people that are arguing the most effective way to kneecap Huawei's growth in semiconductor manufacturing, and by extension China, is to take market share. I think that was getting talked about a little while ago. They believe that mass sale of AI chips will then basically allow us to front run. It's been a while since I've read Sun Tzu's Art of War, but I kind of remember a few concepts of this about how you're going to suck your enemy in before you then do an end around on them. And it seems to me that two things can be true. They may need advanced chips currently, and they also may still strive to develop their own indigenous chip systems. So it seems to me that some people are arguing, well, yeah, but if we just sell these to them, then it's just going to drop off, and it's not going to happen. And now, there's been some, and I think it was Mr. Cassie who had suggested maybe Xi Jinping may not allow this, or whoever the decision makers are. We know it's pretty much him. So what happens if Xi decides not to block Chinese AI labs from purchasing H200? What if he does decide, does that mean America should be selling these H200s or even more advanced chips to China to sort of entice them in?
Yeah, absolutely not. And you're right. Xi Jinping has made clear, and it's cascading through his system, that the message is Chinese companies can buy a certain number. It's not clear how many they're going to permit them to buy of these H200s, but they'll be required to continue buying inferior Huawei chips so that Huawei can catch up and eventually basically push NVIDIA completely out of the market. So it's a total fairy tale to think that this is a way to addict China to our technology. We've seen it over and over and over again.
In my closing moments here, I think Mr. Perry had talked about and asked about testing equipment. I would note that I have a bill, the Semiconductor Technology Resilience, Integrity, and Defense Enhancement Act, STRIDE Act, which would require our allies to adhere to our own export controls. And I guess the question is, should the United States use foreign direct product rule to end foreign backfilling? What we're seeing is some of our allies are allowing that backfilling to go in and do repairs and enhancements and those kinds of things.
We should, if necessary. Our goal should be to reach a good agreement that everybody holds hands on and wants to work together on, but we certainly have that stick available, and it should be part of our strategy if we need it.
And I know, Mr. Chairman, my
What are some of the economic implications of China getting an edge over the U.S. in AI manufacturing? And I worry about this body specifically getting involved in regulating AI because, I mean, I joke around and some of these guys are still driving a 72 Pinto with an 8-track tape player, and they're going to, I mean, I couldn't even spell AI when I got up here. So I'm just trying to figure out where we're at on this thing. Sir, either one.
I'm glad you've raised the economic dimension of it, because I think obviously we've focused first and foremost on these national security issues. The economic dimension of this is enormously important, I think, especially in the context of the reindustrialization that we are trying to pursue in this country. We are so far behind China on so many dimensions of the technology that we need just to make things and to be an effective producer of them. Again, because we gave all of that away making these mistakes the last time around.
Let me stop you there. Do you think, I always worry about this, these lobbyists, knowingly or unknowingly, whatever, I mean, they're mercenaries. They get paid by somebody who's paid by somebody, and it's linked back to the Chinese. Do you feel like they could be suppressing us through economic incentives, and then gutless politicians pass that along?
I think it's something worth investigating. I don't know what's happening, but okay. I think that AI is one of the areas that it's not just about technology as a tech sector. It is an enabling technology that is the advantage we potentially have in becoming better at materials, becoming better at automation, becoming better at manufacturing processes, becoming better at supply chains. If we are going to rebuild our industrial base and compete with China, we have to leverage that advantage. If we let China build up comparable scale in AI, even in purely economic terms, we will have given away the edge that we had and that we really do need.
Sir.
I would add just that helping China improve and expand its influence and dominance in the marketplace in AI is a form of regulation. In other words, we're regulating ourselves by giving a totalitarian dictatorship a major say in the standards and form that AI takes. China regulates more than this august body's ever regulated in its 250-year history. So if we're allowing Chinese companies to move ahead, we are accepting the intrusion of government regulation, except that regulation is being made in Beijing.
Well, that goes to my next question. How close are they? I hear they're a nanosecond behind us. What does that mean? I'm from East Tennessee. Help me out a little bit here, bro.
I do not dismiss the very remarkable innovations that are also coming out of China. They've got good engineers. They've got access to more data than we do because there's no privacy from their government. But the crucial problem for them, the crucial bottleneck, is they don't have the computing power we have. And according to Chinese scientists themselves, as early as a few days ago, they were saying the gap is widening. We cannot catch up to the Americans unless we have that kind of computing power.
If these export controls remain the same as they are now, who do y'all think will lead the AI race, say, in 5 years?
Yeah, if we don't give China a launch pad to try to leapfrog us, we're going to win.
Okay.
We'll win this.
Should there be a total ban in place, NEL?
A ban, sir, on selling H200s and others?
On the chips?
Yes.
Agreed, okay. Okay, if China were to move on Taiwan, what do you think that would mean for the U.S. technology and innovation?
This would be a disaster for the United States because Taiwan is a friendly democracy. They've built up an incredible capacity. In fact, the only major capacity in the world to make these advanced chips, all kinds of advanced chips, including the ones we're talking about. So if China coercively annexes Taiwan, we're basically giving China a kill switch over our whole tech economy.
Agree with me or not, China is an adversary, number one. Number two, China is a competitor. And number three, China is a vast market. And it's, I think, with that backdrop that we ought to look at this challenge with regards to AI. Do the three of you agree with that?
I agree with you, Congressman, in that order. China is an adversary.
Yes.
First, it's been a competitor for a long time. To the extent that it's a vast market, it's not one that is open and welcoming of Americans.
Right, and their reputation for following the World Trade Organization or the rules of, world global markets is lacking. Let's be clear about that as well. The conditions of the export authorization, Chinese customers cannot use chips for military purposes. However, when the CCP's national level military civil fusion strategy, it seems to me this rings hollow. Would you agree with that?
What I would say is that it would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to enforce.
Well, right. I mean, we've seen that time and time again over the last 20 years. Under the MCF, resources, state control, including economic, science, technology, military, and more to advance the party's goals. It's all one entity. It's a syndicate. Once technology enters the Chinese ecosystem, there's no way we in the United States or any U.S.-based firms can guarantee it that it won't be used for military purposes. Is that correct? You all agree with that? And so, I mean, when we have this conversation, it is important to know in the United States we innovate. Chinese folks replicate, and they say the Europeans regulate. But the fact of the matter is we need to maintain our innovative edge, right? Any action on a commercial trade that would close that gap in favor of the Chinese would be a nonsensical starter from my perspective. Would you agree? Why would we want to give our adversary the opportunity to equal the playing field in any circumstance, especially when you understand what the Chinese Communist Party is all about? I think, we owe a lot of efforts to the revolution in technologies that have occurred in Silicon Valley and elsewhere in this country. It has made an incredible economic growth for the United States. But why would we cede those innovations on the investments? And by the way, those investments in part were made by federal taxpayer dollars for the U.S. government that was in our own interest. And that includes the RISC-V, which is an open standard instruction set architecture for computer processors, essentially a blueprint for designing computer chips, which received early stage support and funding under DARPA, under the Defense Advanced Research Projects. Today, Chinese companies, and you go there and you can see it, are touting their use of RISC-V chips that they use for self-driving cars and AI models and their data centers. Is that not correct? So it seems to me that we want to maintain our technological advantages in all circumstances. And given the fact that China is an adversary as well as a competitor, we should not lose sight of that fact when we're chasing markets that might be illusionary in the long term, right? I mean, we see this time and time again over the last 5, 10, 15 years with China. And by the way, they've been fairly successful at it, right? So what would you advise us to do on the current proposal by this administration regarding the sale of these chips?
Well, thank you, Congressman. One would be to legislate to backstop rules that the administration puts forward. If the rules that the administration put forward are enforced, I think it would have a pretty good shot at restricting if not cutting off the flow of advanced American chips. But I think Congress is going to have to act to ensure that those rules would even be followed.
And we should be consistent.
I like consistency.
With our key adversary, the People's Republic of China, and the stakes could not be higher. Whoever wins the artificial intelligence race will gain an edge in economic power, military dominance, technological leadership, and global influence. This is the defining competition of the century. At the end of last year, the president signed into law the the National Defense Authorization Act, which included my bill, the Comprehensive Outbound Investment National Security, or COINS Act, also known as the Fight China Act. The COINS Act ensures that Americans are not unknowingly funding the Chinese military-industrial complex by restricting the flow of capital and investment into Chinese military companies or critical technologies, including artificial intelligence. Mr. Pottinger, you've been long an advocate for this outbound investment regime. How should the Treasury Department think about defining AI in their outbound rulemaking? I literally just came from another hearing across this building with Assistant Secretary of Treasury for Investment Security, the new Assistant Secretary Chris Pilkerton, and I asked him about Treasury's plan for implementation of this. Can you give advice to Treasury on this?
Thanks for your leadership on these issues, Congressman. And I would be. I'd want to prepare something thoughtful in talking to them, but Treasury is a major national security component of the U.S. government, including on where capital flows in ways that could harm us in our lead on AI, or conversely expand our lead.
Well, export controls is obviously an important tool in the economic statecraft toolbox, but so is Treasury implementation of this legislation. The question really is, will limiting investments, Western investments, into AI that advances Chinese military and surveillance capabilities onshore those investments into U.S. firms that can in turn supercharge U.S. competitiveness in this race?
I think so.
Okay. Let me move to another component of the AI race, and that's power. That is the massive increase in power demand that will accompany these AI data centers. Firm baseload power is paramount to the future of AI, as our own Department of Energy estimates that data center power demand is likely to double or even triple by 2028. Kentucky, my home state, is a massive coal-producing state. We literally, after 115 years of mining coal, still sit on an ocean of coal. However, under the two previous Democrat presidents, and because of their burdensome war on coal regulatory policies, the U.S. has retired over 290 coal plants since 2009. That's over 120 gigawatts of power, of baseload firm dispatchable power in this country. Meanwhile, China builds and approves roughly 2 new coal power plants a week. Because of this, we are on the precipice of losing the AI race to China. Mr. Pottinger, my staff recently shared with you a copy of my plan to revive Kentucky coal jobs and power the technologies of the future. What should be done to increase baseload energy production, including Kentucky coal, and help our president win this AI race against China?
Thanks, Congressman, and thanks to your staff for sharing that. I'm in firm agreement that we need an all-energy approach to our power mix and to AI, and of course that also means next generation sources as well. We've got to win in the advanced fission, nuclear, and certainly fusion power race as well. But it has to be traditional sources as well.
Yeah, I mean, nothing can replace dispatchable baseload firm power. Intermittent power sources is not going to cut it in the AI race. If we want to win the AI race, We have to be realistic about what China is doing with fossil energy and what we're doing with fossil energy, and we cannot meet the power demands right now. We're looking at 100-time increase in blackouts because of these speculative investments in green energy, and we've abandoned the firm baseload power that we need for AI dominance. Mr. Pottinger, last question. China is nanoseconds behind us, according to Jensen Huang. What other policies should Congress be specifically targeting to help the president win this AI race?
I think the president's AI action plan lays out a lot of very good stuff, right? Including deregulation, making land available. It includes ensuring that China does not have access to the same computing power. Just a few minutes ago, we were talking about how important it is. The only thing worse than giving China really powerful advanced American chips would be giving China the ability to make its own advanced powerful AI chips. And so American companies have already been restricted from selling semiconductor making equipment to China. We need to make sure that the Netherlands and Japan and other countries are not, should have to abide by the same rules that American companies are, because it's actually going to make the democratic world safer and more prosperous.
Thank you for your leadership on this. I yield back.
Representative yields back. Representative McBride is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Meeks, for convening this important conversation. I'm actually going back and forth between this committee and Science, Space, and Technology, where there's a concurrent hearing happening on AI policy as well, and I'm glad that this this Congress is so focused across committees on this important area of innovation and of policy. I think what is abundantly clear is that the continued expansion of AI, the continued development of AI technologies is going to represent one of the most significant transformations for our species since at least the Industrial Revolution, and perhaps even arguably since human beings thousands of years ago stopped being nomadic creatures and became stationary agricultural-based societies. And that presents huge challenges, huge opportunities, huge questions for this Congress, for policymakers, for developers to grapple with. But regardless, for folks who are watching, regardless of whether they are predominantly excited about the opportunities with AI or predominantly concerned with the challenges that come with it, I think all of us here, and I think most people at home, can recognize that no matter how you feel about AI, we want the United States to lead. We want the United States to lead in this space economically. We want the United States to lead in this space due to national security. And we certainly want the United States to lead in this space so that AI is informed by our values. And of course, today we are talking about a critical tool in guaranteeing American dominance and American leadership in this space, and that is, of course, export controls and what feels like an ever-evolving position by the current administration vis-a-vis export controls. And if you are someone who believes in export controls, we obviously want to make sure that those tools are as effective as possible, that those controls have integrity. And so, Mr. Feiner, I'd love to come to you first, recognizing that no policy tool is perfect. There are limitations of every tool. What are some of the difficulties that come with enforcing export controls that the U.S. federal government, that Commerce has experienced in the past?
Representative, one difficulty historically has been the resources allocated to enforcement, to the BIS, as we've discussed. And by the way, this body should get a lot of credit for working to enhance those resources. More people means more enforcement, and I think that is fundamentally a good thing. Second, and we've talked about this in the course of this hearing as well, particularly when it comes to adversarial countries, hard targets, if you will, like China. Access to information can be extremely challenging, even with the most rigorous enforcement. And so, for example, know your customer requirements that are well-intentioned and important can be very difficult to enforce in practice just because the information base that is being drawn upon is deliberately opaque. Entities use all manner of evasive tactics, from shell companies to just outright obfuscation and lies to try to hide their hand. And so there is this ongoing cat and mouse game. So to me, the most important aspect of enforcement is that it has to be ongoing and vigilant and iterative. It is not a one-off.
Well, that leads me perfectly, and I think I can guess what you will say given that answer, but that leads me to the topic that I know a couple of my colleagues have brought up, which is last night's rule from the Commerce Department on the H200 chip sales. The new rule prohibits the sale of chips for any, quote, military end use, quote, military intelligence end use, or to a, quote, military or, quote, military intelligence end user, with compliance hinging on the department's licensing and vetting process. So given the existing backlog at BIS and past challenges enforcing controls because of limitations among the enforcers, how confident are you that the U.S. can sell these advanced chips to China while reliably ensuring they're not diverted to military purposes?
Look, it gives me great concern. I think it would be a very appropriate topic for interrogation and oversight by this body. And in addition to the ability to actually enforce effectively this rule, I think the other area that we've not really touched on is what a dangerous precedent it could be if this same approach is applied to even more advanced chips going forward. And you know, nobody has indicated that that is the plan, but if past precedent is predictive, then I think that's something that we should be watching for very carefully, because applying this approach to Blackwells, for example, I think would be
to advance well beyond, not just in the AI field, but in the quantum entanglement space and the AI autonomous self-healing drone capabilities, et cetera. And that's why it's so important. But I want to correct one thing, and I just want to make sure that I understand this correctly. We keep talking about the H200 chip. Now, we sell military hardware to many nations, but what we do is that we actually diminish some of the things, whether it be targeted packaging or certain types of electronic advancements, and making sure that the U.S. always stays superior in every single way. But what would be the categorization of the H200 in, I guess, a similar thing to the 950 that Huawei makes? Anyone have any idea what that comparison would be between the two?
Yeah, I think there are a number of different dimensions that these things get measured on in terms of, you know, whether it's literally processing power, memory, and so forth. Depending on your dimension, H200 is sort of comparable or superior to the best that China otherwise has. And I would just also note that China is not one of the countries to which we send weapons with slightly reduced targeting packages.
Correct. Well, look, at the end of the day, we need to ensure that we're always going to be ahead when it comes to China and the CCP. We need to understand their threat that they play in the Indo-PACOM, but also looking at the advancement of the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine to keep the Western Hemisphere secure and safe, and that's all well and fine. But according to NVIDIA, when they talked about the H200 chip, they talked about the 950 being almost to an equivalent, and looking at the 960 that they're developing for 2027 and the 970, which is looked to be developed in 2028. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there's a question of qualitative improvements by Huawei and the quantitative. Qualitatively, it's going to be a few years, according to Huawei's own analysis and analyses of their analysis, looking at that. It's going to be a few years before they catch up to H200s. But even then, they're not going to be able to make nearly as many of them as what we're preparing to sell. So it's like right now, Huawei is a bunch of MiG-21s. You know, getting a little rusty. They're trying to buff them and shine them. H200s are F-35s, and we're saying, well, hey, we're giving F-35s, but we're going to have this great F-47 just around the corner. So it just doesn't make sense. I mean, you could make that case if this were an ally of the United States. This is, you know, someone who's going to actually be enhancing our deterrent. This is straight into the hands of a sworn enemy. I mean, that's how they talk about us, right?
That's exactly right. And not to mention just a sworn enemy, but they've gone after the idea of that geopolitical alignment to essentially try to eliminate the U.S. dollar as a global currency. That was their entire intent. That was the intent of the Belt and Road Initiative, was to gobble up all the natural resource capabilities, rare earth mineral mine capabilities, which is why they were so invested in the 15 of 16 rare earth mineral mines in Africa. Now, I wanted to talk about capacity because one of the things that the Department of Commerce had talked about before is that Huawei can only produce about 200,000 AI chips in 2025, but it showed that they had actually shipped about 800,000. And so I wanted to validate, is that actually true, or is that some type of a propagandized messaging out of the China CCP?
So in terms of the demand signal, so what I'm reading is that Chinese companies are ordering millions of H200s. It's not clear whether the Chinese government is going to allow them to import that many because
they actually banned that today, by the way. As of today, China actually banned and denied the actual approval of the H200s from coming into China, and that was just released just a little bit ago. So to your point.
It looks like they're going to approve Chinese companies buying H200s. In some cases, they're going to say, well, you can buy them to build data centers outside of China to wipe out American hyperscalers' business.
And that's ultimately their job. And as the emeritus chairman had said, China's always been about stealing intellectual property from American businesses. We have to protect American businesses, American ingenuity. We need to advance the America First agenda. And the way we do that is to make sure that we are always at the advancement above China and our adversaries.